Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today we want to talk about the very best 10 GBE NAS you can buy at the end of 2023 and early 2024. Let's be honest, things have changed when it comes to your data, whether it is that you're migrating away from cloud services and getting your own private server, or you're already an owner of devices like this and you're looking to scale things up in the bandwidth states. 10 GBE has got pretty affordable when it comes to the individual upgrades that you can get hold of, be they Thunderbolt upgrades at later, lop on some 10 GBE, or just general network switches. 10 GBE has become exceedingly affordable, and then when you factor in that a lot of devices like these are starting to rock out the gate with 2.5 gigabit Ethernet as well, there are ways to leverage a lot of the bandwidth that are afforded to your different devices in the home or business environment. And don't even get me started on Wi-Fi 6 and 10 GBE upgrades and 2.5 GBE upgrades and just how easy they are to come by. So, in this video, I'm going to talk about my 3 highest recommended 10 GBE NASs in desktop form that you can buy at the end of 2023 and early 2024. But before we get on to that, let's go through some disclaimers and an honourable mention. Disclaimers are as follows. Number 1, for any NAS to be qualified, it needs to be completely and utterly turnkey. It has to be pre-configured, ready to go hardware combined with software that is ready to go out the gate. Yes, you'll need to do some initialization. Yes, you're going to have to get hold of your login credentials and set up an admin. But apart from that, what you need to do on everything, by the way, this will be a complete hardware-software combined solution there. No extra licensing, none of that crap. Secondly, these have to be unpopulated devices. I know there are some users out there that like to buy devices that have already got the storage included to make it nice and easy and straightforward. That's fine, but I know that isn't for everyone. People like flexibility, they like choice. So all of the solutions I'm talking about today have to arrive with optional hardware in terms of storage. You don't have to buy hard drives included, although that might be an option along the way. Another thing, they also have to support partial population. What do I mean by that? It means that even though a solution might be 4 bays, 6 bays, 8 bays, 20 bays, you should be able to only populate some of it and add drives later with different levels of flexibility. All of the solutions today support that. Also, they support cross-platform communication and synchronization. That means that regardless of whether you're a Mac user, a Windows user, an iOS user, an Android user, a Linux user, and you've got different devices dotted around your home or business environment, they should all be able to communicate with this system and the data inside it regardless. And lastly, between all of them, and this one's very specific to the subject of today's video, all of the solutions I'm talking about today have to have the potential and the capability to fully saturate 10 GBE. More on that in a moment, because fully saturating 10 GBE is really, really important to taking advantage of 10 GBE. 10 GBE is a network bandwidth. It is an external connection in the case of what we're talking about here, gigabit Ethernet. 10 GBE responds to 1 gigabyte. It corresponds to 1000 or 1024 megabytes, but it is still a pipe. You still need the NAS to be able to deliver that amount of water through the pipe. There are examples I've talked about before. The F2423 from TerraMaster is a 2-bay NAS device that has a 10 GBE port on board. This down here is the Synology DS723 Plus. This has the option of adding 10 GBE if you choose, but it's only a 2-bay device. It's very difficult for those devices to fully saturate 10 GBE without utilizing NVMEs or SSDs. So all of the solutions I'm talking about today don't just saturate a 10 GBE connection. They need to be able to do it easily without you having to configure and do the device up in some weird way. And finally, all of today's devices today, all the devices we're going to talk about today support at least 3 years of hardware manufacturer's warranty, maybe a little bit more in some cases, and there is extendable warranties on some of them. So, with all of that in mind, the honourable mention, and this is a NAS that is not part of the 3, but I do think is worthy of note and definitely consideration, is TerraMaster's T9450, a 9-bay NAS device running on an Intel Atom 4-core 8-thread processor with 8 gig of DDR4 memory, support of ECC, although it doesn't have ECC memory, but moreover, it has 2 10 GBE ports on board. This system arriving at about 1000 to 1100 Nika, has 9 SATA bays on it. It's got 2 M.2 NVMe slots on it. So again, you can use SSDs in there for caching or storage, but it's got 2 10 GBE ports on the back there. That's 2 gigabytes or 2000 megabytes per second, give or take, of external network bandwidth. Why on earth isn't that in the top 3? Well, nice and straightforward. Their software is a little lackluster. Also, their systems don't seemingly, they're not made as efficiently, I would argue, in terms of power output as the likes of Synology or QNAP. And the result is that even though this system is running on a very competent processor, it's running with a very reasonable amount of memory and has 9 storage bays and 2 M.2 NVMe's to output on that 20 gigabits per second, the performance numbers, even when you look at TerraMaster's own website, aren't as good as what some other brands have done with that same hardware. A lot of internal optimization. They're still very, very, very good, and with the right hardware configuration, you can definitely fully saturate those two 10GBE ports. But I would argue TerraMaster hasn't got the breadth and the scale and the budget of R&D as some of the other brands out there to really optimize the software running on it, TOS 5.1, 6 around the corner, to make the most of it. And that's why it's my honourable mention and not one of the top big 3. But for now, let's crack on with my legit number 1 recommendation. By some distance, the best 10GBE ready NAS in terms of software that I can talk about is the DS1823XS Plus. It was a NAS that I reviewed, I think, more than a year ago now, and arguably, compared with the majority of NAS solutions I've talked about from this brand, this one promised so much in terms of including everything users ever wanted in terms of hardware from a Synology NAS of this level. Now, of course, it has 10GBE, a copper 10GBE port on the rear, but it also has a PCIe upgrade slot there to add single and dual port 10GBE upgrades if you choose. But it doesn't stop there. This system running on a V1780B embedded Ryzen processor there, 4-core or 8-thread processor there, great for virtual machine deployment there. Also arrives with ECC memory out the gate, 8 gig of ECC memory that can be upgraded to 32 gig when needed. An 8-base system that also has 2 M.2 NVMe slots inside it, Gen 3x4 speed there. So you've got a couple of NVMe slots there that can really crank out some silly performance numbers. And with the system having a couple of 1GBE ports, which are going to be more about network low-level protocol access, but having one 10GBE port and the potential to add 2 more, as well as, I might add, 25 gig fiber and even 40 gig, not officially supported, but definitely work Mellanox cards, means that this system has a huge amount of external network performance potential, but also the internal hardware to really back it up. The system also supports 5 years of manufacturer's warranty, and although in terms of software, it doesn't support one of my favourite features, Synology Hybrid RAID, I would say this system still supports every single other feature of DSM. You name it, Synology's A-class NAS software platform that they get so many recommendations for in terms of usability, in terms of capability, and that single ecosystem design, DSM just ticks every single box. And if you have a limited system admin, or you need a tech, if your IT department is quite minimal, this is going to be a great system to make things very, very user friendly. It still has the building blocks to really crank out something special, but still nonetheless, DSM with its enormous range of applications designed to not only allow you native, tailored and easy access to all of your data, be it via the Synology interface or your local one with the NAS working more as a target device, also arrives with tremendous levels of if you have the single ecosystem for communication between employees and consumers and customers, if you want to create a surveillance network, if you want to run the multiple virtual machines, if you want to create the perfect multi-site deployed synchronized storage and backup system, all of that is available here. And indeed, all of this, although probably one of the most expensive devices on this list, racking around 1,800 to close to $2,000, may put some users off, it is one of the best combined hardware software solutions available at 10GBE. And if you're looking at Synology solutions and you're looking at desktop, although there is the bigger boy at the DS3622XS Plus, I would argue this is better value for money for what you are getting overall. But just before we move on, before I forget, bear in mind hard drive compatibility on this thing is a bit all over the place, with Synology prioritising their own hard drives and SSDs for use in this system. Or although you can put third-party drives in this system, they will arrive and display as unverified on this system, and it may be problematic down the line if those drives can be proven to have caused a fault with the system, incredibly small as that potential is. Now, right at the other end of the spectrum, seriously, we've got this. A NAS that I talked about on the channel. I think this is their third appearance in the best of the year categories the videos I do every year. The FlashStore 12 Pro caught everyone by surprise. And I really do mean everyone. If you're even casually following storage, casually following networking, you've heard of this device. This knocking around for about 850 nicker, so 1,000 nicker, give or take, cheaper than the system we just talked about, is a 12 times NVMe system. This device arrives with support of 12 NVMe's, 6 on the top, 6 on the bottom, but it also has a 10 GBE port there on the rear. Now, its hardware architecture is considerably more modest than that of the Synology we just discussed, with Asustor racking this out with an Intel Celeron processor inside the N5105 or N5095, because that CPU family, thanks pandemic, is an absolute mess in terms of model IDs. Arriving with 4 gig of DDR4 memory that can be upgraded to 16 gig inside. This is a very modest NVMe flash system, also arriving with Asustor's ADM software, which although isn't as evolved as Synology's platform, and there are fewer AAA class apps and services on there, I would still say it does a reasonable job. It gives you all the baseline applications. It allows you to run a BTRFS system. There is a surveillance application. There is support of VirtualBox. There is support of Plex Media Server. There is support of multi-stage backup, multi-site backup and synchronization. They're all the base level stuff there. And although there are loads of client applications available for Mac, for Windows, for iOS and Android, there isn't as many as Synology. There isn't, as hard hitting there. There isn't the Active Backup suite. There isn't the collaboration suite. But if you're never going to use all that anyway, and what you wanted was a 10 GBE solution that was high performance, low power use, low heat generation, this is a fantastic option. Particularly now that the cost of M.2 NVMe's has dropped the way it has, the result is that you can actually populate this with 1s, 2s and even 4 TBs at Gen 3 level moderately affordably. It's still going to cost more than doing it with hard drives, but still nonetheless, this is a 10 GBE system designed with NVMe's in mind and a much lower powered efficient CPU inside to get the job done. Now, with that price tag, of course, comes compromise. Now, one of the biggest compromises for that price tag is, of course, the CPU. They've gone with that CPU, either going with, it has to cost this much, this is what we've got to play with, or they kept it modest to start with to make it comparable to a lot of fully featured devices, and ultimately that has led to that bottleneck and then that eventual price tag. Those bottlenecks, for example, all of those M.2 NVMe slots inside, although Gen 3, so 1000 megs per second per one, are all ×1 speed. So every single one of those M.2 NVMe's is going to cap the SSD, which may have rolled out the gate a Gen 3 SSD at 2,500, 3,000 megs. They're all going to be restricted to 1,000. You still get the performance benefits of multiple SSDs and an array configuration being read and written to simultaneously, but still nonetheless, that is going to present a bottleneck. It's also worth highlighting in terms of bottleneck that this system may be 10 GBE and there's a port there. There's no means to add more. You can't add more PCIe cards in there, and although you can use USB adapters to add 2.5 GBE, that 10 GBE on its own is pretty much as good as you're going to get for that high performance bandwidth port there. So the result is, even though those NVMe's will take advantage of performance benefits native to utilizing the right RAID configuration, which generally adds about 10 to 15% every single time, output wise, you're never going to realize that, so do bear that in mind. Now, in terms of heat, I did have concerns about this device with that many NVMe's and such a small plastic chassis and its heat generation, but not only did Asustor point out quite vociferously that they were 3×1 speed and therefore heat generation would be significantly less, but on top of that, they did their own performance tests in terms of temperature rising there with the 12 bay doing RAID scrubbing and more, and you can check that out in the video on their YouTube channel. Ultimately, this isn't a system that's going to blow you away in terms of software, and it's probably not a system that's going to blow you away in terms of performance if you're only looking at 12 M.2 NVMe's, as they would be natively at their full performance speed. But at a price point a grand less than the Synology we just discussed, support of gradual upgrades of NVMe's over time, and support via those USB ports of expansion devices from Acer Store. And these USBs, by the way, are 10 gig USBs as well as a visual output and a dedicated app for the parallel HDMI interface known as Acer Store Portal. It's very, very good for the money, and I still recommend as a 10 GB NAS in 2023 and 2024, it is still a contender. Which brings us on to a QNAP, and this QNAP arriving at about 1500 Nika is the middle ground between the two solutions I just discussed, but in so many different ways. The TS855X is a NAS that I've talked about already on the channel, and I would argue this system, even though it's not one of the big front-runner devices from QNAP, they could really stand to talk about this device a lot more. Arriving with 6 SATA bays there on the front for hard drives. It has 2 additional SSD bays as well for SATA SSDs. It also has 2 M.2 NVMe slots inside at 3x4 speed. But obviously the showstopper here is the fact that it arrives with both 10GBE and 2 PCIe upgrade slots that can be populated with dual port 10GBEs if needed. This thing has the potential to have 5 10GBE ports on the rear there. Now on top of that, those 6+2+2 storage bays allow you to take advantage of Q-tier from QNAP. They allow you to create one giant storage area that takes advantage of slow hard drives, faster SATA SSDs, and insanely faster M.2 NVMe's at 3x4 speed, and then combine them into a single storage pool that intelligently moves your data to the appropriate area as data is accessed, and therefore creating an organic and native and automatic tiered storage system where data you're not using for a while moves into the cold area for archiving. Data use that's moderately accessed and used from time to time is moved to the warm, and current scratch disk live data, maybe for editing, is immediately in the fast area there on that triple tier storage system. And this is done not only thanks to that triple tier storage inside, but also with support of an 8-core Intel Atom processor, the 5125. Again, a very modern Atom processor there. I think it's either the most recent or the generation just before it, and arriving with 8 gig of DDR4 memory that can scale up to a whopping 128 gig. And although it is an ECC memory, you can use ECC memory if you choose. So ultimately, this is a fantastic base level to get things started on your 10 GBE storage upgrade. Combined with that, there is the software. Now, this isn't as good, the software, as Synology's DSM platform there, but what I will state is this software is pretty darn close compared to anyone else in the market, notwithstanding a full range of apps and services for all of your client devices and OS, spreading that support across multiple OSs there, so you've got client applications for your mobile devices, for your desktop devices there, and other server client devices as well. Things move in even deeper when you look into the storage management tools that are built internally, but whether it is you're looking at the storage manager combined with hybrid mount to bolt on large object storage and other NASs onto this system, utilizing virtual JBOD to do things in reverse there, and you've got support of cloud management tools such as Hybrid Backup Sync 3 and a lot of their hyperscale storage devices and virtual machine management and storage targets as well as BoxSafe that allows you to integrate the likes of Microsoft Office, Office 365 and Google Workspace into this system natively, so everyone can still access all of their details via their Google clients, but rather than them synchronizing directly via the internet with the cloud, what happens is all of those devices are synchronizing with the QNAP and it establishes its connection with the cloud, ultimately meaning that all of these people using those local client kind of UIs built into Google on their devices, if there is a break in the internet connection, they won't know because they're communicating with the NAS, which is caching all of the data, and when the internet is restored, this system and the QNAP NAS will re-establish and back up all of the data that has been created or modified during that meantime. They're not the only ones that do this. Synology have provided this with Synology's Active Backup Suite for a lot of time. And BoxSafe, I would argue, is not as good as Synology's one there, but the QNAP platform, which I will talk about time and time again, is far more customizable. And whereas Synology are trying to create that single ecosystem that I've discussed in order to replace all of your third-party apps and make sure everything is in-house, you have to change a lot of your workflow to meet the way Synology does things, whereas on QNAP's side, the QNAP platform is far more customizable and configurable in order to make it for it to try to configure and create itself around your workflow. Does that make it easy? No. It can often result in a system where there are inconsistencies and definitely a higher learning curve overall. And I would say the QNAP application is often, QNAP's QTS and QUTS applications are often trying to do too much when it could, stand to maybe stop the user doing certain choices along the way. Another thing I will add is the TS855X not only supports QNAP's QTS ext4 platform, but it also supports the ZFS file system QUTS version as well. So again, removing the volume layer for higher performance, introducing triple parity, triple redundancy RAID configurations there, as well as support of RAID Z as well. And ultimately, between these two software platforms, there's a lot of configuration and customization afforded to you to take advantage of the TS855X in a very powerful and capable way. And again, the scalability and adding more drives with expansions in 2, 4, 8, 12 and 16 bays, along with PCIe upgrades, mean that this system has got a huge wealth of potential afforded to you. But do read up on QNAP Deadbolt and how they were targeted along with a bunch of other brands before making your purchase, because that may change how you view this box in your own network setup as you go along. Just be informed, and ultimately, if you know what you are doing, this is a system that will give you arguably better performance than any other system I talked about today. And there you have it. Those are what I think to be the best 10GBE NASs that you could look at the end of 2023 and going into 2024. I did look at rack mount devices because as far as I'm concerned, with rack mount, not only is 10GBE mandatory across the field, but often when it comes to rack mount devices, a lot of the nuances and the differences between them become few and far between, notwithstanding the old business tax. Maybe I'll do a rack mount version of this. We'll have to wait and see. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. If you need further assistance and you're still on the fence about what you need, take advantage of the free advice section over on NAScompares, the right hand side of every single page, big blue button right there, or use the Discord or the free ask.NAScompares community support forum. Alternatively, get expedited support or access to our membership program over on Ko-Fi and Patreon that will allow you to not only get faster support but also access a lot of these videos early and access our monthly Zoom and seminars here on the channel. And finally, you can go over there on the commissions tab to hire myself or Eddie to help you with your data storage needs. And finally, there are links in the description to loads of guides, resources, reviews and tutorials on all of today's products and other ones I've not discussed. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching and have yourself a fantastic Christmas.